Grounded as it stands is already a pretty challenging game. It has a monster fish you can't fight, the bugs you can are neither gentle or squishy, and despite the acquisition of late game equipment, some fights with the yard just stay tough. But what if tough wasn't tough enough? What if I had a Soulsborne prodigy in my ear, telling me the real challenge was gated behind my own self-imposed boundaries of stripping away boundaries to make my life not a living nightmare? What if my viewers said they'd watch that playthrough? Turns out, under these circumstances, we pose the question, can it be beaten with one of the lousiest weapons in the game? Enter the Pebblet Spear. Let's talk about it. There are 5 weapon damage types in the game: slashing, piercing, busting, chopping, and generic. Spears deal piercing. Of the 5, nothing in the art is tough against generic, which is why clubs in this game are god tier for any point of any playthrough. On the list of which has the most bugs resistant to it, piercing is at the top of it. The small caveat to this is that several bugs are weak to piercing, specifically in their eyes. This translates to 95% of the time using a weapon against an opponent who is naturally resistant to it, and 5% of the time lucking out and poking them in the eyes. I can also throw spears, which throwing any weapon in this game deals significantly more damage. I've seen clips of people dropping ladybugs by throwing a few clubs, so I decided, what's a dozen spears? For this playthrough, I can use only the Pebblet Spear as a weapon to defend myself from the yard. I can poke with it, I can throw it, I can upgrade it down any tree. I can keep an inventory full of it if I feel like it. But no matter how I salivate at the thought of the spicy Coltana, I must beat the campaign, return to normal size, using only the Pebblet Spear as a weapon, in a week of streaming to complete the challenge. I feel like only a truly crazy person would do something like fight one of the optional bosses with only Pebblet Spears, but if, by some miracle, I am able to beat the main game before the week is up, what else is there to do? The Bor that is writing this section of the script is the same Bor who recently finished the stream of day 1, with this fresh in his mind, in the hopes that breaking it up this way will make the whole end product process a little more streamlined, but I respect that it may make the flow a little weird, but that's editing Bor's problem, not writing Bor. And then, as I booted up, loaded in, and began again, the first anomaly. In all my many playthroughs of Grounded, I have never heard bombardier beetles firing acid on spawn, nor have I had lawn mites crawl into the hole with the kid case. These wanted not the smoke, but to catch specifically these hands. The challenge starts as soon as I'm out of the hole in the ground. These idiots aren't supposed to be here. As soon as I climbed out of the hole, I set straight to work gathering resources, scanning them in to learn how to make things, and making things, like my very first Pebblet Spear. I promptly lost it among other spears. I will be holding no emotional attachment to any of the spears in this playthrough. I tried firing up the spacer, unsuccessfully, made a torch, fought some lawn mites with my spear, fired up the spacer for real, and caused a small catastrophic explosion a handful of feet away. For the uninitiated, in Grounded, the characters you play are sized approximate to a grain of rice, so a few feet is almost a quarter mile by scale. Maybe less, I'm making up figures. Not the rice sizing, though. I ventured off in the direction of the sound of the explosion, because when an explosion only puts off purple fire, purple smoke, I have questions that I need answered. I never expect them to be answered by a robot, designed as a short order cook, repurposed into a lab assistant, however. Unfortunately for me, he only answered my character's questions, pertaining to how and why they are there and to get home. I just want to know what I broke and how to fix it. After learning nothing of what I wanted to from Burgle, he told me that to get home, I would need to visit his lab partners 4 setups across the yard to regain his missing memory chips. Without these chips, he can't remember how to help us get home. I mean that in more ways than the embiggening cocktail recipe. He told me he could remember where only one of these chips is and where its lab is located. So I started making plans to assail the hedge. I built a small place to call my temporary home, set up my respawn point, and doubled back to the tree for parts to make some armor. Realizing I would need berry chunks to make my armor, and 4 spears in hand, I set off for the first dungeon. On the way to the hedge, I grabbed some clay and berry chunks when I got there, and ran into my first hiccup. Normally, to get berries out of the hedge, I will shoot them with a bow and arrow. That felt like it would be breaking the criteria of the challenge by crafting a projectile weapon. My spears as a projectile weapon weren't doing it. So, being as it is for gathering resources and not combat, I started throwing pebblets to get them down. In the beginning of this video, I stated that I would only use the Pebblet Spear to defend myself. Berries are passive. If anything, using a rock to get a berry down is less of a fail than the lawn mites I punched when they wandered into the kid case hole for the first time in at least 2 dozen boot-ups of this game. I set up my hedge operating base by the birdbath, in keeping tradition with the old ways. I slept, put together something to eat, neglecting the fact that every lab has some food in it, built my workbench for armor, realized I had forgotten the acorn shell I needed, putting on display once again that I am a potato with hands, finally got most of the gear I intended to use together, and was promptly punished for this poor planning by being pitted against my first orb weaver. The spider was less scary than I was anticipating once I started throwing my spears and taking up more than a sliver of health with every attack. A lawn mite came to my aid, for God only knows what reason, served almost no purpose beyond a momentary aggro pull, and died in the kind of obscurity I fear to in this playthrough and every playthrough I have of Phasmophobia on the highest custom difficulty setting. And I finally went at it the evening of day 4 in-game. I remember a time when the hedge ascent was marked by a paper clip. The addition of the shears takes away from the challenge of climbing in. This new player hand-holding in games has to stop. Let us suffer. We will learn or we will perish. I managed to get to the flying disc, also known as a frisbee, only falling out of the bush once. Then I did it again, right before I got into the lab breach, the place you're supposed to go in, and used my intimate knowledge, dredged from the recesses of my mind of the hedge's layout, to come in another way. I know there's video evidence of how I did it. I don't remember how I figured it out. The hedge lab can be demanding, with the Orb Weaver Juniors with their poisonous bite, Tase T robots, and small pile of spiderlings. To clarify, I am aware of the distinct difference between venom and poison. I'm just trying to save my own sanity by adhering to the game's definitions of stuff. It's venom from the Broodmother, super venom from the Black Widow, and just poison from the rest of these assholes. Speaking of these assholes, I made like the Dragonborn and used an entire wheel of cheese to conquer this lab. The Tasties will attack pretty much everything, including but not limited to the spiders in the lab. Knowing that none of them would give me superpowers from a bite, I let the robots make shorter and less poisoned work of them than I ever would have, and swooped in to finish off survivors. I fumbled around inside of the maze, forgetting where I needed to go, until I finally remembered. I grabbed a scabby scheme, turned it on, opened some spider eggs for the bug parts their mother left for them to eat when they hatched, to further cheese progression, and grabbed the first super chip. And this was all in, the first 2 hours. I felt good about the time I was making and the ease I was having. I didn't think it would be this smooth, even on the easiest difficulty. But on my way to Burgle to drop off the chip, decided I could make it even easier and cheesier still. Spawn progression, meaning what bugs spawn where in the yard, is gated by the super chips you have turned into your chipper companion. I use this term loosely. I truly believed Burgle would be the final villain during early access. I believed it all the way up till I beat the campaign. Anyway, about this fondue pot I'm now crafting, I can force extra shitty bugs to not spawn in places by simply not turning in the super chips to Burgle as I collect them. So instead of giving Burgle the hedge chip, I gathered some lily pad wax, a dagger, some eelgrass, and began making preparations for the pond lab. I hate the pond lab. I don't like being underwater. It's disorienting, I get lost easily, and I'm uneasy about drowning in real life, though that'll happen when you're not a trained lifeguard and have to be one a few times, almost trading your life out for another. But anyways, on top of that, water spiders. It took me a few dives to find the T-Rex figure and swim to the lab. And the first time I did, I didn't, by drowning within actual nanometers of breathable air. The second time, I neglected to flip the inside switch to turn on the outside switches to actually bring power back to the lab and unlock a couple of doors, almost drowning again. A koi statue to add to my collection here, more water spiders, this time in confined spaces. The Arkers here are a little like Tasties, in that they are robots, were made by Dr. Tully, and will smack you for trespassing. Unlike the Tasties, they will shoot great big balls of static at you, explode in a burst of the same, and are tankier. So a little nastier, but manageable. The one redeeming quality of this lab is this. This music is playing here, canonically, because the muscle sprouts being grown require a constant 80s workout style stimulus to grow. I come back here less for the potion base ingredient and more for this absolute bop. I bailed on the lab and decided to give the chips I had gathered to Burgle, if for no other reason than to start seeing the weird ominent technology dreams. I didn't really get any crafting recipes I needed out of either of them. I finished out the day with a smithing stone, some upgrades to my spears, and a test run of said spears on some stink bugs, who chewed straight through my freshly crafted gas mask. I also lost a spear somewhere in the direction of where I will later be building my main home for this and likely every playthrough I have of this game ever. Day 2 started out with a dancing ant. He was probably excited to see a new troop member wearing the carapace of his slaughtered siblings to trick them into thinking I am one of them in order to steal their larvae. Why do I need red ant larvae, you ask? To make bombs, of course. Every good entomologist knows that red ant larvae have highly volatile properties that, when combined with a mutated fungus from a fictional world, turns them into explosives. But why would a tiny teenager in a backyard need explosives? The same reason I spent the next hour gathering resources and debating between heavy armor that would increase my healing or medium armor that would increase my stamina regen. That reason is the haze. It sucks. I chose the medium armor. This ladybug didn't have to die today. It could have died later for repair glue parts. This wolf spider, on the other hand... Wait, what are you doing back there? No, what the fuck? You're not supposed to offer backup. No, get away from me, you eight-legged bitch! Shit. This wolf spider, on the other hand, did need to die, if not to atone for the crimes of wolf spiders in the past few seconds. The medium armor set I'm after requires spider parts, and the hood requires fangs, specifically. I may have an intense phobia of the fuckers, but I'll be damned if I won't drape my frame in the pelts and parts of my slain enemies. The haze is an unforgiving area of the yard. All of the living bugs within it, I say this because there's plenty that aren't, are absolute bastards. The boss bastard being this bastard. Ladybugs are scary enough in their own right, but given projectile explosions and backup from infected mites that are tougher than some of the larvae I've fought up till now, fights turn out to be pressing. I rushed through the poison-covered part of the yard to the sealed door to the lab. This is where I needed the bomb. There's another, less expedient way into the lab, but it requires swimming in a pipe with water spiders. Why would I, when I can just do this instead? Infected gnats will disarm you in making contact, hence why those two in the entryway needed to die. I won't be jumped from behind in this place, the one lab that actually manages to freak me out. This room here I especially hate. It's just full of infected weevils, which only self-destruct when they get close to you. In earlier playthroughs of this game, I had no business getting stuck on this specific room when the boss room is right around the corner. Did I say earlier that the infected ladybug is the boss in the haze? I meant this ladybug, specifically. Notice the chunky purple health bar at the top of the screen that laughs when I throw my spears at its host's body. If this weren't set to easy, I'd have gotten reduced to Swiss cheese by all of the mite spit. I dropped her, swept up the remaining mites, grabbed the super chip, and swore to never return to this place unless under the most extreme of circumstances or duress. The next step in my plan for backyard domination requires an oven to turn mushroom slurry into bricks, with which to build a small fort I will be calling home for the remainder of this playthrough. To build an oven, I need charcoal from the grill, and to obtain it without setting myself on fire, I need antlion armor, and a mutation called Fresh Defense, gained from horking down 2.5 breath mints shaped like cavemen to train my body to exude a spearmint effect cloud, shielding me from the hell that is the sun bouncing off of sand, charcoal that never goes out, and larva spit. First, though, I need to climb up the picnic table. The picnic table, in addition to bees that will shed their passive ways if you should dare to climb up here with them, contains a zip line that runs to the edge of the sandbox where the antlions live. Unfortunately for me, it requires 12 silk rope that I neglected to craft, let alone bring. In lieu of waiting on a spinning wheel, I decided to do what I usually do, and just build a staircase into the sandbox. This way, I can also get back out without a tuft, or the assistant manager's key card to access the zippy. Antlions are almost a walk in the park for me. They only have a couple of attack patterns, which I'm used to, so fighting these guys is just time-consuming more than anything. The most intimidating part of the venture was this big blue box in the background here. A wolf spider lives under there, and I was afraid it may have come out to join in the fray as it sometimes does. Here I got lucky. Also a big fan of the level of style that the antlion armor provides. Day 3 started out with my audio borked on stream, and me unaware of how bad it really was until almost the end. Positives, I got it fixed. Negatives, this day gets omitted from the published VODs. In addition to bad sound, I also started off with some larva spikes and evercoal chunks. The coal is for the aforementioned oven. The spikes are to make whetstone, which I need to upgrade my spears further, which is steadily getting more and more expensive. Let me give you some perspective. I fully intended, at the time of writing this, to run 25 spears in my inventory. At level 5, I can send them down a flavor path to add to their effectiveness. To do so requires 5 globs of the desired flavor. 1 glob is a candy shard and a sturdy tier 2 whetstone. So to start the flavor process, that's 125 sturdy whetstone. To get one up to the point that's ready for that, uses 30 brittle whetstone, so it will require 750 brittle whetstone for all 25. I conceded at the time of writing this that there is almost no chance of me bringing a whole 25 spears up to the desired strength level. Even the 10 I still have by the end of day 3 is a shock to have at level 3. Wow, a lot of 3s today. Something to that. I started on the Black Ant Hill lab, wanting to see how challenging the assistant manager would be. Turns out, not terribly. The thing that's most challenging about this particular boss is his ability to overwhelm. With all the chaos of multiple opponents, rotating lasers, the Tesla towers in the corners, it can be easy to lose a big chunk of health all at once and lose track of the boss's location amongst all of it. At one point in the fight, I threw all of my spears and had to scramble to pick them back up lest I accidentally punched an opponent. I beat the assistant manager, took his keycard, stared at a map I wish I had known about sooner, gathered the 4th and final super chip, and returned to Burgle to deliver the other half of his super brain, which is much less super than any name given implies. With his memory fully restored, Burgle can now remember almost the whole and beginning cocktail recipe. Almost. One ingredient remains a secret ingredient and is sealed safely in the mind of Dr. Tully. He also remembers how to track Dr. Tully's Scabby, allowing us to run him to ground and just ask for the recipe. This information would have saved us a heap of effort and even more danger. Good job, robot. I am considering a run where I attempt to go directly to the final lab for the doctor to see how much can be skipped. I had another dream about my kidnappers, this time of their conversation to dispose of me, and when I awoke, set to work building what will be my home for the remainder of this playthrough. Nothing fancy, just some bricks that'll be tough enough to stand up to an assault from an angry yard, which I am no doubt on my way to fully inspiring. I set up some sap collectors, having not yet done the math regarding bringing 25 spears to level 5. Whatever, I'll need it all anyway. In my travels, I found some human remains. These were anomalous, in that the rest of the skeletons that I found to this point in my playthroughs had goodies on or around their former person. This one was just display bones. Who the hell was this? Happy with the finished product of the house. I do enjoy building stuff. Don't mind the leftover grass walls from the night or two's stay while I built. Those will probably be plant fiber tomorrow. Day 4 kicked off, like many others, with me gathering resources. I was down on some things, and knew I would need all the larva spikes if I was going to get my spears up. I thought better of gathering a single chunk of gum from angry bees in the night. Still really need those gum chunks. In preparation for the hell that I knew was awaiting me, I built a fast travel path in the form of a zip line to easily get between what will certainly be the place I died last and my respawn. I'm not sure why sometimes I need to do things in reverse order, but apparently this was one of those times. I found the easiest to reach sour candy, and got reminded that I would need a tier 3 hammer to get it. The first ingredient that I could remember in the Black Ox hammer is the Black Ox horn from the Black Ox bastard beetle in the upper yard. These things suck. They hurt a lot, and don't give much of a shit about my pebblet spears. I forgot how to parry this one. And this one. It took me not 2, not 3, but 4 entire fights with these things before I got my horn, the final fight including fire ant cohorts. I attempted to snag some cookie chunks for my defense buff, and got told to fuck myself by the fire ants. After which, I realized I would need pupa leather in order to make the hammer. In order to gather pupa hide to dry out, you need the tier 3 axe. See what I mean about backwards? Start with trying to get the candy, and then work back to the tool I need to get the tool I need to get the candy. Termites also suck, though not as bad as Black Ox beetles. They're like a pale fire ant that moves faster and squeaks like a dog toy when you hit them. Fortunately, I only need a couple of chompers for the axe. I temporarily forgot why I came to the upper yard in the pupa run. I came here for pupa, not lint rope. I don't have the hammer yet, I have the axe. Why am I like this? Okay. Once again, placing on demonstration that I am in fact a potato with hands. I let a fire ant and a ladybird fight it out while I grabbed this hide that I needed, slept through the night while it dried into leather, and crafted my Tier 3 hammer. The funny thing is, I require this hammer to progress the story, not just get sour candy, which was the order I mostly executed in. Wendell Scabby, once fixed, told me that the doctor had hidden himself away under the shed to try to not die to one of the side effects of shrinking. I climbed in a plastic rocket bottle and gathered my first sour candy chunks, went to where the larvae lived to harvest their body parts. They repaid the favor in kind. I upgraded 2 of my spears to sour in preparation for the nightmare to come, and set off to face my backyard nemesis, the Black Widow spider. Someone in chat asked me which is worse, the broodmother or this. Well, the broodmother's not as fast, doesn't have super venom, but is a lot tankier, and spawns more minions. She also doesn't eat her minions for crazy buffs, and poison doesn't stack the way venom does, so I would honestly say this. I did not survive my first encounter, nor did I gather up the 11 spears I left behind before ending the stream for the day. Day 5 launched with me dying at the hands of the Black Widow again, and realizing that this may be too much fight for Pebblet Spears. If she's going to stay buffed through the fight and shrug off most everything I do, it's a losing battle. So I went back, gathered what spears I could, got eaten again, and began planning. The Black Widow is not a boss, it's just a high-level enemy. They spawn in a few places across the yard. By New Game Plus 2, they spawn everywhere wolf spiders do. Meaning, unlike fighting a boss bug, the tunnel to the lab won't be sealed off, and if I'm very careful, I can sneak around her, which I did. I have an actual boss fight directly ahead of me anyway. I got jump scared by this infected larva right here. I don't know why this lab scares me so much. The Black Widowlings followed me into this lab to punish me for skipping their parent, and forcing them to die by my spear instead of in her jaws as a buff. I entered the room with the man. Max set his boundaries of not fighting Mance. I respected them, and the challenge concluded. Thanks for watching. Back in reality, I challenged the man. The man was less ferocious than the Black Widow for so many reasons. He's not as fast, he telegraphs his attacks a lot more, he doesn't have any buffs from eating the ants he summons to his aid, and as an added bonus, he sounds just absolutely crazy. I love it when he talks. The Mant represents the culmination of all of the lab's individual research put together. The berry from the hedge for skin, as well as spider webbing that came dangerously close to copyright infringement. The muscle sprouts compose his entire muscular makeup. The fungal mutation of the haze for mutation stability and some nasty projectiles. And the condensed raw science from the mixer program in the Black Ant Lab, which did not get touched on at all in this playthrough. Combine all of that with the desperation of a man whose body is withering like a raisin, and you get this boss that, after the fact, becomes a hat tip to one of the greatest RPG franchises of all time. With that out of the way, I went to find the doctor, who mistook me for an Ominent employee. I told a joke he almost took seriously, which for a moment concerned me that he might put me to death before realizing my sarcasm. Once we sorted that all out, he told me about the embiggening cocktail and its vital ingredient, grilled science. We never learned the origin of this strange particle we call raw science, and this guy's just tossing it over hot coals and letting a robot do the actual cooking. The bar for genius gets lower with each passing day. I grabbed the grilled science from the fridge, perused the meals he had in there for what would be useful to me, and wandered back into the den of the Black Widow to recover as many of my spears as I could. 10 is not a bad number. Back in the yard, I got thoroughly distracted and preoccupied by a conversation with someone in chat, which, having received their permission during the stream, will be another video in the not-so-far future. Hell, I just got distracted going over the footage. I'm supposed to be writing a script. What was I? I started building the bridge into the Moldork playset to enter the final lab and beat Schmechter. If I'm going to skip the Widow, I feel I have to make up for that somewhere. Before I could start, though, I had to do something about these stupid-ass mosquitoes. It took me the rest of the day, but I got it done. I said a quick hello to the hole I used in the friendship metaphor, and this time descended it with a tuft instead of with broken ankles. Director Schmechter, the head of Ominent Technologies, the guy who kidnapped me and a bunch of other teenagers to run his twisted experiments on. Sure, he solved the raisoning problem, but at what cost? This boss fight is a lot like the assistant manager. only instead of summoning Tasties and Archers, he summons much more capable and poisonous Orb Weaver Juniors, and he summons them as he feels like it, not set to a health or population limit. I got overwhelmed the first time. No real shocker there. Get it? Because the electric balls? I'll see myself out now. I ran back down to the pond lab for more muscle sprouts and a jam session. If I had been thinking clearly, I would have hit a button on this venture, but thought I was tougher than I actually was at this point. Made some green machine smoothies for more hyper stamina, because having stamina to fight and run is king, in addition to the health boosters from the fuzz on the rocks. Round 2 went much better. I didn't realize that, in addition to the recipes for some of the best in-game gear, you also peel all of his research documentation off of his robotic body, hence facilitating the good ending. I had no idea. I set out to begin the endgame procedures and forgot I needed to gather materials for the embiggening cocktail. I remain my own biggest hurdle in these, I swear. Fortunately for me, the full release of the game added the super duper to the Oak Lab, meaning for raw science, I can duplicate items without having to break the game code. By this point, I was concerned for the time constraints of the challenge and if I would actually pull it off, so I gathered up a piece of each of the materials I didn't already have 5 of. I was excited to find this gum here, didn't realize there was a spawn for it, and had them all replicated through the power of cloning, I assume. I slapped together some defenses around the nodes and the power cables, and prepared for an intense fight. A constant wave of mind-controlled bugs, some of the nastiest the yard has to offer. These flyers here always pose a problem, as they completely ignore the walls I've built. The real trick to this fight is holding aggro. If they aren't trying to kill you, they're trying to kill the Java-matic, but if you're dying, you can just suck down a smoothie. Nodes cannot be repaired during the raid. I failed the first time, I think it goes without saying. This is the most overwhelming fight of the game for sheer volume of opponents alone. Day 6, I started out armed with the knowledge I had gained doing research the night before. Mushroom Brick was good, but it was not going to stand up to the Java-matic raid. Not on its own. I was going to need ash cement to reinforce the core layers, which meant traveling to this part of the pond lab to unlock the stump lab. The stump is a treacherous place, littered with fire ants, ticks, wasps, mosquitoes, and wolf spiders, some of the meanest rough and tumble bugs the yard has to offer. The lab here is its own kind of hell, in that it is laying vertically on its side, turning the whole thing into one giant parkour challenge. Normally, I do okay with parkour challenges. Between things like lore-whoring Sea of Thieves and my recent playthrough of this game, including this portion of gameplay, you wouldn't think that it would be that challenging. It was. Of all the parkour challenges I have ever done, I don't think I've bumped into any that have as many overhead obstacles to interrupt your jump line than this one here. I also ran into this asshole coming back out of here, and I pooped a little bit seeing him. I am not proud to admit that what you're seeing here, i.e. me leaving that hole, was a calendar 7 human minutes after what I just showed you. It took me that long to realize he was likely stuck against some obstacle, making disgusting hissing noises and clomping around audibly directly on top of me, and begin making my hasty scrambled retreat back across the upper yard. I gathered up some more coal from an overturned grill that, after a month, is still burning strong, raising some serious questions about what, how, and why. Avoided another wolf spider. I supplied Burgle with the latest Super Nintendo cartridge I had found in the yard, praying internally to get a turn soon on his stashed away treasure. I spent some of the raw science I was gifted in exchange for my donation to learn the thing I needed and some things I'd never use. Finally got around to building what is now and will forever be a facet of every base I build in this game going forward while I waited for coal to mill. Admired my handiwork and its aesthetic beauty, and ran off to duplicate some of my charcoal ash, as the time in game it takes for more coal to spawn exceeded my time allotment for this challenge. I then realized I need rust to make ash cement in addition to clay and ash. Fortunately, rust is a pretty easy resource. Smack a rusty nail with the hammer and it dissolves into a few slabs of rust and its base atoms. I will never fear stepping on a rusty nail again. Enough of it is around the lower yard, although I'll admit I never gave the rusty nails even a glance until this stage of the game on my first playthrough. I blame my ignorance of these things on a multitude of early access runs of this game. I spent about 30 minutes baking resources into other resources, and set to work reinforcing the defenses at Tully's tiny backyard Alamo. I stacked 3 layers of walls around each the first time. This time I swapped out the core layer from brick to ash cement. I built some roofs on top of the walls, hoping that they would thwart the flyers at least long enough to get their attention. Attempt 2, I got within licking distance of victory, and had it stolen from me by my own hubris to not stop to get more potion stuffs before the fight. So repairs, more potion stuffs, and another jam session for morale and luck. This bombardier beetle didn't want to see me go, and could only express that by weeping his acidic juices all over my business. More fuzz on the rocks, because materials are simple and extra health always helps, and I was back at the Java-matic, replacing the holes they had made in my soft spots. Almost failed to challenge throwing a weed stem at these ants in frustration, chased them off with that same energy, slept one more time, and fired up the final encounter. This encounter was not a pushover. It shouldn't be. It's the final fight of the game. It's in essence a final boss. It should be a living hell. But I, as an old school gamer, am used to having a small party against a massive BBEG, or said BBEG and his handful of cohorts, not an unyielding tide of bigger and bigger bugs. I felt outnumbered. Shit, I felt outnumbered in my main world and had to call in almost all of the reinforcements to get through. I don't have that here. This is a solo playthrough. I cannot have one of my human companions join me in this fight. And so I asked the question, what would Paul do? He'd enlist a companion from within the virtual universe of Fallout that was his playground. Depending on the task, that companion could range anywhere from a worthless slave to a worthless slave. I can only slave one ally here, and it's the Mant I beat yesterday. Armed with the Mantsteria's Stranger mutation, almost called it a perk there, and its willingness to spawn me in more than one during the fight, I was able to keep the raid off the points long enough to fully brew the embiggening cocktail, further ruining poor patient Trudy's coffee maker. I gathered my freshly brewed? Mixed? Was it shaken or stirred? Whatever. I grabbed my freshly cooked prize, scrambled back to the spacer, slapped the new embiggening cell in it while actively ignoring fight music. I hugged a floating head in a jar because he reminded me of one of my favorite cartoons and it felt like the right thing to do. I fired up the spacer appropriately, got zapped back to my normal size, and beat grounded using only pebblet spears. And some cheese. There was definitely some cheese in the sandwich. Again, I had a lot of fun with this challenge run. However, it has also been a solid prompting to think about my next challenge run more thoroughly before initiating it. There's a part of me that thinks I could have cranked up the difficulty to add to the spice, but fear that in doing so, I would have either reduced the final raid to either running and pulling aggro while the bugs chewed on tough walls too thick to eat through, or simply undoable with only the pebblet spear. Either way, still just a little shocked that I did it, and glad there's video evidence. Thanks all for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like button if you like the video, the subscribe button if you like the vibe, and the bell if you want to know about the next one and are into that kind of blood sacrifice to my algorithmic gods. If you want to hang out, I stream 6 days a week over at twitch.tv/BorrTheWolf. Thank you all once again, and catch you on the next one.